we can fill you in on all that you need to know. This right here is a book that I brought with me that I don't know if you can find it. I found it by accident. But it's called Socialism, Social Welfare, and the Soviet Union. And everything that I'm going to talk to you about tonight, you can find it. It was already done and implemented in the USSR, the Soviet Union. Very communistic. The other thing I brought was this one because I need you guys to realize this is called Our Global Neighborhood. And it's a report by the Commission on Global Governance. And until I got involved in this, I didn't realize we had a global governance. So that's a pretty important little thing that I feel like bringing it physically kind of shows you it exists. And then this one kind of shows you the background of all this. This book was written in 1974 by the Club of Rome. And when you get right there on chapter 1, first thing you read is, the world has cancer, and the cancer is man. And these guys are heavily behind this movement that I'm going to speak to you about tonight. The other one's this little guy right here. This is the Communist Manifesto. And this thing is all up in here. So as I go through this thing, you're going to see a lot of information that came straight off this book. Okay. I'm going to bring this thing through a few areas better. Okay. I'm going to try to introduce you to the key players that are behind this. And then I'm going to bring you into the overall of the big picture of what's going on. And then I'm going to bring you more local to what they're doing in our states. So hopefully that'll kind of give you an overall of what I'm going to be bringing you through as we do this. Okay, you ready? Okay, this is Agenda 21. Now when I say Agenda 21, I'm not talking about only Agenda 21. I'm talking about 3 plans that were introduced to us on the same day at the same event. And the names of them are Biodiversity, Climate Change, and Agenda 21. And so let's get going and try to explain to you what we're doing. And I just thought that was a wonderful saying that Reagan had. It so well describes things. It says, concentrated power has always been the enemy of liberty. And if this thing's not concentrated power, I don't know what is. All right. Okay, Rockefeller Foundation. They financed and backed up quite a few laws and acts that were brought in upon us. And I'm not saying that all these were just horrible. I mean, we needed to clean up our water, we need to clean up our environment, but their interests in them were not to accomplish cleaning our environment. Their interest in them was control. And the one that I want you to notice is the Adirondack State Park Agency. This is in north of New York. And it is the template for what they're trying to accomplish on all of us. And for anyone who's familiar with that, there are large zones that have no humans, and then other zones that have humans, but it's really, really, really massively regulated. Forget property values. If you drive through there, it looks like it did in the 1960s because nobody can do anything to their property to change it. Okay? Okay, here's some dates in history that matter. EPA, 1970. Maurice Strong. This is a name that I'm going to make you very familiar with tonight. I hope you know exactly who this man is by the time you go home. In 71, he did a report called Only One Earth. And that's when we started having people try to create this mindset of overpopulation and the world's becoming toxic and all this mindset of we have to clean up everything and just an abundance, an overreach of environmental gurus with a mindset of locking down our rights to our property and such. And then you have the Adirondack that I mentioned. And in 74, the concept of sustainable development arose after the United Nations adoption of the Declaration for the Establishment of the New International Economic Order. So it's the first time that word ever kind of got splished out here for us. Okay? In the 80s and 90s, you have the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. They are the guys that write all these plans. Biodiversity is written by these guys. Climate change, written by these guys. Agenda 21, written by these guys. Maurice Strong on the board for this organization. 1983, the World Commission on Environment and Development, set up as an independent body by the United Nations. This is, we said, this is owned by Gro Brundtland, another person I'm going to make you very familiar with. 87, sustainable development was first defined in the United Nations in 87 in the report of the World Commission on Environment and Development, Our Common Future. It's a book I have. That's Gro Brundtland. 1990, the term sustainable development begins to enter our vocabulary. In 94, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. That's part of this, guys. That's why we're losing our businesses, our companies, because they want social justice. They're shipping our companies all over the world. They're trying to flatten out our income, and that's part of this thing. Also, when NAFTA got signed in, with it signed in the North American Agreement on Environment Cooperation and the North American Agreement on Labor. So all that stuff was one package in NAFTA, part of this, okay? Now, this is a book that I have. It's called Beyond Interdependence, The Meshing of the World's Economy and the Earth's Ecology. It's written by Jim McNeil, who's friends with Maurice and Gro Brundtland and all. It's introduction and it's forward or written by Maurice Strong and Stephen Rockefeller, to kind of give you a little bit of the guts of who's doing this stuff. And in the beginning of it, it says, in order to use nuclear weapons as political leverage, a country must be militarily, technologically, and economically strong. Countries need not be rich and powerful to employ environmental issues as leverage. They're saying that they can take us down with environmental movement, and not only will we not know it, we won't be able to defend ourselves from it. They're saying that while we're out shopping and living our lives and thinking that all is right with life, they can be busy doing what is literally attacking us. This is a war. If we end up not having a right to our lives, we've lost a war. And they did it through environment. We're busy looking for bullets, and they're doing it with environment. And in this thing, what I want you guys to notice is that they're big on population control. See, policies to reduce high rates of population growth. They want to control how many human beings are walking around on this earth, because for them, the word sustainable does not mean that we are being responsible as to how we live and treat our environment. Sustainable means we don't have too many humans in our environment. They want 50% in just environment, and they don't want too many humans on it. Okay? Now, let me start introducing you to the players in this thing. This is Miss Gro Harlem Brundtland. I thought this was a man, and then I figured out it was a female. I can't imagine who would name their daughter Gro, but anyway. She is the founder and chair of the Brundtland Commission, and that is formally known as the World Commission on Environment and Development. We said that I was just speaking to you about. She's the former Director General of the World Health Organization. So see, the pieces are coming together. When Bill Clinton became president, the first thing Hillary did was try to create health care, government health care, because they are involved in this heavily, and that's one of the pieces. And that's why you see Obama pushing so heavily right now for government health care. It's a piece of this. She was the vice president of the World Socialist Party. And so for all you guys that don't know what that means Fabian socialism. Fabian socialism is a touch different from straight out hardcore communism, and this is how. Hardcore communism, they come in, they take your house, they throw you out of it. Fabian socialism does it a little bit different. What they do is they tax you and regulate you out of it, and then they throw you out of it. So they're no kinder, they're no nicer, they're a bunch of Marxists, but that's how they do what they do. She's the author of Our Common Future. She coined the word sustainable development. Okay? This is some more on her. She established UNCED, United Nations Council for Environmental Development. It came off of WECED, the World Commission for Environmental Development. UNCED, she ran the Earth Summit. She was the vice president to the Earth Summit. Maurice Strong is the president to the Earth Summit. So there are some of the pieces there. Through Our Common Future, she called for the World Conservation Bank, which is the Rothschilds' World Conservation Bank. She also established UNTAD, which is United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. What I want you to notice in these things is I'm going to be naming these people. They establish these organizations. They make them themselves, and then they chair them. They make themselves head honcho of them. So these guys have total control by doing this stuff, okay? Here's the next character I want you to meet. This is Maurice Strong. This man has stayed hidden well. I don't know how we haven't known him better until now, but this man right now is hiding in China because he was doing a deal where he was swapping food for oil in Iraq and kind of got caught. And the United Nations didn't do anything to him, but they said, okay, step aside for a while. So he's hiding over there. He owned the Baca Ranch, which was 200,000 acres of land in Colorado. And the reason he wanted it was because underneath it is the largest aquifer in the United States of America. He was going to dam off the sides, starve the people out that had land outside of it, sell the water to cities. So he's talking like selling water to a huge city from this ranch. And he owns Petro. When you hear about Obama giving the grants to Petrobras, he's Petro, George Soros' boss. The guy owns a large hydroelectric company. He's a very powerful man. Oh, by the way, Gro Brundtland was the Prime Minister of Norway. He was the Prime Minister of Canada. So we're talking about prime ministers here. We're not talking about everyday Joes. These are pretty powerful people doing what they're doing. Okay, so let's get into him. Back up a little bit. Let me catch him. Okay, he's the driving force behind Agenda 21. He's the founder and the first Secretary General of United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP, also UNDP, United Nations Development Program. UNEP you're going to see behind land grabs. UNDP you're going to see behind water grabs. This guy established these and made himself head chair. Following the Earth Summit, Maurice Strong was named Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and was appointed to the position of Chief Policy Advisor. So for this, you need to know that he drafted Draft Strong, and from Draft Strong, he handed that in. It was asking Bill Clinton to remove the existing Secretary General of the United Nations and replace him with a new Secretary General, who was Kofi Annan, and then Kofi Annan became Secretary General of the United Nations and assigned Maurice Strong as his senior advisor. By Maurice Strong being the senior advisor, we didn't notice the things he was implementing because everybody would think it was Kofi Annan. He's a member of the UN Commission on Global Governance, showed you that book, and the key architect of the Kyoto Protocol. Okay. Here's some more of him. In 1947, this man became best friends with John McCloy. John McCloy is the gentleman, he's an attorney, and he was overseeing the Rockefellers' finances, and the Rockefellers decided to create the World Bank, and this man became president of the World Bank. By the way, the Rockefellers also own Chase Bank. In 1972, the UN Conference on Human Environment at Stockholm, he was the president of that. He created it, chaired it, all that. Then in 1973, from that, he creates United Nations Environmental Program and United Nations Development Program. Then in 1981, he seats as the president of the World Wildlife Fund. Then he becomes the trustee to the Rockefeller Fund. Rockefeller Fund finances a whole lot of this stuff, and there's the gentleman who's in control. He's also on the board of the United Nations Foundation, which is owned by Ted Turner. He's Secretary General of UNCED, which Gro Brundtland created UNCED. She makes Maurice Strong Secretary General of. Senior Advisor, Kofi Annan, that I just explained to you, Senior Advisor on the Commission on Global Governance. He served on the Brundtland Commission. So if you can see this, he was in the IUCN, he's in all those, lots of little tentacles. Now, I want you guys tonight to look up the words World Wilderness Congress. It'll scare you to death, it's real, it exists. And I'm going to give you some details about it. Okay, every year, or every so many years, that one, it started in 1977, they went to Africa, and they had a conference. And when they do these conferences, IUCN, that I just showed you, has already written up a plan. And they'll do a conference, and at that conference, they introduce that plan. And they try to get leaders to sign on to that plan to implement it in their countries. And so I met a wonderful gentleman, Mr. George Washington Hunt. He attended the 4th World Wilderness Conference and gave me a lot of very important information on it. But what I want you to get is that they go to different places, they have these conferences, at these conferences they introduce these plans, and they have leaders sign them into their countries. Okay. Now, at the 4th World Wilderness Conference, Congress, which is the one that George Washington Hunt was at, They had the International Wilderness Leadership Foundation. They set that up, and they made Michael Sweetman the director of it. And they set up, that conference was to set up the World Wilderness Bank and the World Resource Institute. Those two are interconnected. They work straight off each other. The president would be Michael Sweetman. The attendants at this conference, or some of them, were Edmund Rothschild, David Rockefeller, Michael Sweetman, William Ruckles. He's the head of EPA, first president of EPA. Gro Brundtland, Maurice Strong, James Baker. James Baker was the Secretary of State under George Bush Sr. That's how we got this in on top of us, okay? Now, at the World Conservation Bank, Brundtland unveils Our Common Future, the report of the World Commission on Environment Development, which she chairs, we said, and then a spinoff from it, UNCED. UNCED, know this, if you look up Cairo, Egypt, and UNCED, you'll see a lot of stuff on population control. They're big on that. Which was also created by the Brundtland and is approved as a powerful organization involving every country in the area of environment development. Maurice Strong is the Secretary General, and the Rothschilds own and control UNCED. They also control WESED. They also own the World Conservation Bank and the resource. The Brundtland Commission principle calls for creating a World Conservation Bank. World Conservation Bank, the first thing they did was they started transferring debt from third world countries to this bank in swap for their land. So what they wanted with this World Conservation Bank was they want to take land and water and own it and have it in that bank. It's under the Rothschilds. They would own large scopes of land. Okay. This is the map of the world, and they were just kind of, they had this there, and he gave me a copy of it, and it just kind of shows that they wanted to go all over the place and just start gobbling up land all over, and they needed a plan by which they could do this. Okay, next one. This was the percentages of land that they wanted to try to get. If you look over there on that percentage thing, you'll see they want to own 34% of the land in the world and have it in this bank. They want to own 35.5% of America, of North America, and have it in that bank. And so they came up with, this is what we want to have in this bank, for us to have a bank of value. And actually I read that what they wanted to do was crash the dollar. The Rothschilds are behind gold. They want to reinstate a new currency. It would be electronic, and it would be based on land. Okay, next one. They needed a plan in order to try to get this land from us. And so they came up with these three plans: biodiversity, climate change, and Agenda 21. Biodiversity would be about control of land and water. Climate change would be a system of taxation and penalization. And Agenda 21 would be about control of people. Okay, so let's go into Global Biodiversity Assessment. This is a book that they wrote. It's very thick, 1,000-something pages. And in it, it is prepared by UNEP. Remember, that's Maurice Strong. And it has 1,140 pages documented on some United Nations leaders with the ecology basis. And it's a moral authority they needed to validate their global management system. So what they're trying to tell you there is that they needed something to back up their plan. Okay? The UN Convention on Biological Diversity was introduced to the world at the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. It was written in 1981, so they wrote this quite a bit before that. And it says that it is estimated that an agricultural world in which most human beings, or peasants, should be able to support 5 to 7 billion people. In contrast, a reasonable estimate for an industrialized world society at the present North American material standard of living would be 1 billion people. Property rights are not absolute and unchanging, but rather a complex dynamic and shifting relationships between two or more parties over space and time. Biodiversity Treaty states 1/2 of America to nature. So they're talking about they want to own half of America and have it in this bank. And if you'll pull up the World Wilderness Congress, you're going to see right there on their front page, they brag about it. Half land to nature. And they also talk about lowering the number of people that are on that land. Okay. And this is the map that they came up with for us in America. This is the biodiversity map. The red, no humans. The yellow, few humans, a lot of regulation. The green, some humans. So what this shows you is that their biodiversity map is what they're functioning off of in order to try to take our land and put in this thing. Dr. Kaufman, I'll get into him in a minute, but he's been a very awesome guy in trying to help us to bust this open. Okay. Okay, so let's go into climate change a little bit. Climate change, CO2 tax, global taxation, that's all that is. CO2 is not a toxin. It has never been a toxin. If you'd have went back 20 years and told somebody that you were going to tell them that the air they breathe is toxic, they'd have thought you were crazy. It makes plants grow. I mean, come on. The stuff that comes out of our body is not a gas that is dangerous or deadly. If it was, we'd all be dead. But they made up this lie so that they could tax us, so that they could get this money, and so that they could get control. The greenhouse gas, all that's about is them trying to take some companies and spread them out. They want to break us down. They want to get rid of our companies. They want to send them overseas. They want to control technology. And that's a machine to do that, and it's a great machine to do a penalty through. These guys love penalizing. They make a lot of money on penalizing us. And so that's what that's about. Transfer of technology, that helps them with that. Man-made rather than cyclical. They said that if they could make us believe that it was man-made, then that we would go along with them on letting them tax it. They could swap credits, they could play all kind of games that they do, and they could get in control of a lot of stuff. They need us to bite into this and believe in it, because this is the mechanism that gives them power through biodiversity and Agenda 21. And if we discredit climate change being made by man and that CO2 is a toxin and all these greenhouse gases, then their other two plans don't have any foundation to exist. So this is a very important thing to them. Okay, this is the Earth Charter. The Earth Charter is written by Mikhail Gorbachev and Maurice Strong. And I guess they didn't have much time to write it, because all they did was take the Soviet Union Charter that obviously Mikhail liked from his country. They diddled it up a little bit and put some environmental guru in it, and that's what the Earth Charter is. It is the Soviet Union Charter. This charter is the foundation to the Earth Summit. So these events they have, there's the foundation to all the plans written by IUCN that they want to implement on us. Okay, it comes off of this guy right here that I showed you. Communist Manifesto, which says abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to for public purposes, heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax, abolition of all right of inheritance, confiscation of property of all immigrants and rebels. It just goes on and on and on. It is as anti-American as anything we could ever want to get into. Okay? And I just wanted to remind you, America, United Nations. America believes we have inalienable rights given to us by God. United Nations they work off of a Soviet Union charter. And the United Nations believes that man gives us our rights and man can take them away, and that property shall not be arbitrarily taken. That doesn't mean that they can't take it from us. That means we can't own it. Okay? Now, we're going to start going into Agenda 21 and what they do. They travel from place to place. Matter of fact, this week they had one event on September 7th, one on the 14th, one on the 21st. They just did one on June 28th in Washington, D.C. You won't hear about these things on the news. They keep this off the news, and I'll show you how. So what they do is they travel all over the world, and they have these conferences. And at these conferences, they introduce these plans, just like the World Wilderness Plan that I showed you. And so then they try to get leaders from different countries to be at these things and sign on to it and bring this into their country. So some of these that I want you to know about, the Rizhback fisheries. That's why you can't catch but one fish in the ocean. They want to bring in a law of the sea. They want to take total control of our oceans. Opposite of it, Almighty program. That's transit. That's the buses. That's the trains. That's the sunrail. That's how they want to control us while we drive, while we travel, at all times on our roads. Then the Habitat 1, human settlements. We're going to go into that. That's sustainable communities and such. Nairobi, that's how they keep this off CNN. That's how they keep this off of Fox, CBS. We turn on our TV and I get insulted. I hear 7-year-olds talk about how they can drive their dad's mud truck. Who cares if a 7-year-old can drive their dad's mud truck? Our country's about to go to hell. And so here they are hiding everything they're doing and entertaining us with information about Britney Spears. And that's why. That one was financed by Ted Turner and Stephen Rockefeller. That one over there, the Millennium Declaration, that one was George Soros. I'll get into it some more in a minute. The monetary consensus. This is about Bretton Woods 1, Bretton Woods 2. This is why we are broke right now. This catastrophe that we're experiencing is not by accident. Look into Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton changed Glass-Steagall. He deregulated our entities, our finance entities. He did that on purpose. He's the one that pushed through rules that was going to cause more people to be able to buy houses than could afford them. He did the things he needed to do in order for us to land where we landed, because they have to bust our dollar or they can't get us over there. So this stuff's not by accident. These guys are very crafty. The Millennium Declaration, I'm going to get into it. The Doha Declaration, that was done right before NAFTA. That's about trade finance. So the Doha, that was the meeting they had before they came in and threw NAFTA at us. Okay, go ahead. Okay, here's some details about the Habitat 1 human settlements. Actually, Emil read you this. Land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also the principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. And what I want you to notice is down here, you're going to see these things. They want to redistribute the population in accordance with resources. They want to control where we live. Government must control the use of land to achieve equitable distribution of resources. Control land use through zoning and land use planning, comprehensive planning and such. Excessive profits from land use must be recaptured by the government. What do you think the death tax is? We can't die and leave our children our stuff because our government's taking it. Public ownership of land should be used to exercise urban and rural land reform, and the White House Council, the executive order on the White House Council that got signed about 2 months ago by Barack Obama is nothing but headed completely at rural and at farmers, and it's a nasty piece of paperwork that we have to undo. D5 is owners' rights should be separated from development rights, which should be held by a public authority. And that one I want you to really notice, because I'm going to show you where they're implementing it daily upon us. It really does matter. Okay. Some of the players in this thing are HUD, EPA, Department of Transportation. They've got them all up in there. Some of the guys in attendance was Sierra Club, some of our federal government people, National Audubon Society, Friends of the Earth, Conservation Foundation, and the League of Women Voters. Okay. All right, let's go into this one a little bit. Now, what I need to explain to you is that 1992, when we had the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, they said that they didn't want to scare our politicians away. So they wanted them to think it was more like a photo op than anything else. So they said they would kind of keep things kind of light, make it kind of like a photo op, and they would make biodiversity and climate change hard law, but Agenda 21 soft law, because Agenda 21 has some nasty stuff in it. And so in 2002, they did the Johannesburg Plan of Implementation Conference. In that one, they tried to make Agenda 21 hard law. And so I wanted to show you that this is the one. It's big on patterns of consumption, controlling how much we can have of water, electricity, anything. And what it does really that I want you to know is it really starts going into energy. It really starts going after education. It really starts going after healthcare. It really starts spreading its tentacles. It really starts going into sustainable communities. That's when we start seeing these things really start coming down on our heads. Okay? Now this one, the Millennium Declaration. This thing was financed by Open Society, which is George Soros. This one's really ugly. This one was written by a guy named Sen, who was a utilitarianist. He wrote the capacity approach. Capacity approach states that unless you have the capacity to produce, you have no right to use anything that exists in nature. So what it's saying is that if you're a senior citizen, if you have a handicap, if there's some reason you can't be productive to their level, you have no right to eat or drink or sustain life on earth. So that's a nasty, ugly something, and this thing was one of their plans that they have. And you'll read the Millennium Declaration many a time as you're digging into this stuff. Know that that's what the Millennium Declaration is. It is population control de jure. Okay? Okay, Earth Summit. This little guy, he's all up involved in it. Al Gore. Al Gore's been in this from word go. He was at the 1992 Earth Summit. He was part of it. He was working with the guys from before it. Him and Clinton, they've been in there. So what I want you to know about him is when you see him with the climate change thing, you know we're being gamed by Al Gore, who's in this. And what I want you to notice also is that they had they had a Viking ship with a gale on the front of it, and I'll get into that some more. That's kind of strange thing that they're doing. But I want you to notice that Al Gore led the U.S. delegation, where he was joined by 110 heads of state and representatives of more than 800 non-government organizations. So when you see NGOs, that's, very often some of them involved in this. Okay. And this, lots of people say, well, how are you hooking up UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, and EPA? How can you prove to me that those guys are working together? Because UNEP and UNDP and UNCED are functioning over EPA. So there's the contract. And it's actually signed by Lisa Jackson and Maurice, and also there's a contract between UNEP and EPA. Okay. And here's the structure of that whole system that they're functioning, bringing these laws and all on us. And so you have the World Resource Institute, which is also the World Conservation Bank. You have the World Wildlife Fund, and you have the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. They're the guys that write everything. Maurice Strong sits on the board for the IUCN, and these are all a bunch of the entities that function under the IUCN. Okay? And then you got to get into some of the money on it. The Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. The World Bank has hooked itself into the IMF. The World Bank gives loans to public-private partnerships. A public-private partnership is it is a combination of tax dollars and grants and such, or loans. And so World Bank is funding a lot of this sidewalks, pipes, buildings, you name it. They're helping on this. They're big in this. They're owned by the Rockefellers. Non-government organizations and civil societies also get these loans from the World Bank and get contributions, and they can give them to the public-private partnership. And the reason they do that is because that way, when we're getting this funding for these different wonderful little ideas, we don't know where it came from. We don't know who gave it to them. So you have to really dissect these things in order to figure out where it came from and to dig it back to over there, to the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or the Ted Turners or George Soros or any of those guys. Okay? All right, let's get into the path to Agenda 21. Remember, this is one of 3 plans that they were bringing in on us. It was H.R. 353. It's introduced to Congress, passed in the House, failed in the Senate. The Convention on Biological Diversity and Global Biodiversity Assessment were also introduced. Agenda 21 was never voted on by Senate after Dr. Michael Kaufman presented a map of the proposed development of the wildlands under the Agenda 21 in the United Nations. And what I want you to know about this is this guy was the environmental scientist who was employed for the United States. They took his map, they took his studies, they took his information, and he started seeing them tweak it. So he was going to them and saying, there's something wrong, you're not saying what I gave you, and there became an indifference. And so he quits, but he hurries up, and he gets a copy of that book I showed you, the biodiversity book assessment, and then he took the pages out of that, and he found that map that we showed you with all the areas that we can and can't live, and he walks in front of Senate with that. George Bush done signed us in. His Secretary of State done had us real involved in this. And so Dr. Kaufman walks in front of all these people and says, whoa, whoa, wait, this is what you're about to sign on to. And so Senate doesn't approve it. They say, no, we ain't doing it. And so then President Clinton gets voted in, and the next year, by executive order, he signs it in through the President's Council on Sustainable Development. And so as of that time, that became something that was on our heads in the United States of America. Okay. All right. So sustainable development was the main outcome of the United Nations Earth Summit. Agenda 21 outlines in detail the UN's vision for the centrally managed global society. This contract binds governments around the world to the United Nations plan for controlling the way we live, eat, learn, move, communicate, all under the noble banner of saving the earth. So it is a 40-chapter something that covers everything that we will do. So remember, biodiversity, land and water, Agenda 21, our lives. Okay? All right, the U.S. role. I want you to notice this right here. It says, of course, they're trying to claim the United States should lead in this, and that's because we're the superpower. That's because the United Nations was created by us. But they said the EPA, International Working Document, this is through EPA, August 6, 1993, states the executive branch should direct federal agencies to evaluate national policies in light of international policies and obligations, and to amend national policies to achieve international objectives, all without a vote from Congress. And so what they're saying is that we need to take our rules and laws and our entities, our Department of Transportation, our Wildlife and Fisheries, our people, our organizations, and we need to change them. And so they actually changed their mission statements and stuff to abide by what is actually a United Nations movement. Okay? And this is how it's structured in command, in chain of command. You have the United Nations, you have these entities that are being set up by Gro Brundtland, Maurice Strong, those guys. Underneath that, you have our federal government, and all of a sudden it's coming. Actually, you should do it more like an hourglass, because EPA is the entity that they function so much of this through, but still. And then you have a state level, your state government, and then you have your local level, your local government. And what I want you to remember is when you hear Van Jones say, top down, bottom up, there it is. This is what he's talking about. He's saying top down, United Nations and federal government, bottom up, local government coming up, and then the middle. We're the middle. And so what we have to do is we have to educate our bottom up, because if they can't catch that bottom up, they don't have us. Okay? This is a map of Florida forever. You guys are in there. This is the kind of stuff they do. And in Maryland, they have the upper forever. They use this forever word. And this is their biodiversity maps in our state. This is what they're trying to accomplish. In the state of Florida, they have 9.9 million acres at this time that they'll admit to that's in the Conservation Bank. They own 35% of our state, between everything. So this is their pods and puds and things, and this comes off Florida Forever. Florida Forever comes off biodiversity. So this is not Agenda 21. This is biodiversity. This is control of land. Okay. This is the Wildlands Project. This is how they get control of your parks. This is how they get greenways, trails. I'm a land developer, and I would develop a subdivision. They'd want some green belts and some conservation easements and all that, and I never questioned it. I just gave it to them. I didn't know what they were going to do with it. I didn't really care. I didn't think about it. And then when I found all this, I'm thinking, oh my God, they're collecting land from all over the place, and they're putting it in this. They also have control of the Murphy Act. The Murphy Act is land that we pay tax on property in Florida instead of having a state tax. And so when we can't pay that tax, if it goes up to auction and if no one buys it, it becomes property of the state. Well, now instead of being property of the state, it is property of DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, which is owned by EPA, which is owned by UNEP. And so now they don't pay taxes. They own land that they don't pay taxes on that got taken because the people who owned it couldn't pay taxes on it. So see, that's the kind of things they do to us. Okay, now this is very important. This is the American Heritage Rivers map. They like the word surface water. They plan to take control of our water through surface water, because what they say is that surface water is pretty much all water. And so Louisiana's getting eaten to death. You know, a lot of Mississippi, Florida, my word, they're all after us. And this is one of this is one of the mechanisms of functioning through the biodiversity. Okay. And this is, I wanted you to notice this statement right here. It's a supporting documentation of the Biodiversity Treaty called for setting aside up to 1/2 of America in totally protected wilderness reserves, which would be interconnected by wilderness corridors, up to 30 miles wide, primarily along river corridors. And so what they're doing is they're using the land and the water in order to take possession of everything. And what I want you guys to remember is when you hear someone say the new oil is water, this is why. Because if they can get possession of our water, they've got a very important item, and we'll pay anything to have it. Okay, you're going to go ahead and hit the next one. Okay, this is the surface water improvement management. This is how they implement it. They do it through water management districts. Districts are not elected. The head of it is assigned. And they're setting districts up, water districts up everywhere. And so through the water district, they have taken, they claim that the federal government owns all waterways, lakes, rivers. Well, now they've upped it through the water management district. They're claiming that the government has right to possess all water and that they are the owners of, and that it gets better than that. They can get the rights of the banks through a less than fee, because they couldn't come up with enough money to buy the banks of all waters. And so through a less than fee, as of 2011, it's understood that they have ownership of those corridors you just saw them talk about, that 30-foot thing. And I can't get them to give me an exact number on what it is as per water area. So anyway, but what they want to do is they want to take away a person's development rights. So notice that, development rights, don't ever sign those away. What that means is if you sign that away, you can never build another shed on your land. You cannot build another house if yours gets knocked down. That piece of land is dead. It has no value anymore. They just took the value. They took your rights to, you accumulate wealth with land through development, and you can't do that anymore. They stole it from you.
Did you say 30 feet or 30 miles?
30 feet off the bank, but I see some areas that they're claiming 50 feet. So, yeah, I guess it kind of depends on what bank it is, and they're talking everything down to fish ponds.
So that's not the same as the 30-mile corridors connecting the wilderness areas?
No, see, well, it all interconnects. It's all going to become one picture. That map I showed you with all those zones and areas, that is how they connect it. They grab conservation land here, they grab a river here, they grab the banks here, they grab a beltway there, and it all becomes the big picture. So they're not particular how they steal our land, they got a plan. Yeah, yeah, they do it in pieces and plods as they go. Okay? All right, the Numeric Nutrient Criteria Act. You guys don't have this yet? Watch for it. It's a monster. We have it. It came to us under the Clearwater Act. It's enforced by EPA, DEP, the Department of Ag, and the Water Management District. And what this law states is that all waters have got to be cleaned to a degree that it's impossible to acquire through reverse osmosis. And so reverse osmosis is what is used by Red Cross and such in order to separate red blood cells from white blood cells, from platelets from precipitate. Well, you know, cleaning water is good, but they're going with such a low sieve that it will bankrupt the water companies to try to do this in their through the water and sewer companies. But bigger than that, they're implementing it on every water body throughout the state. So if a man is a farmer and he has a fish pond that he waters his cows in, he has to go get one of these osmosis filters and try to filter the water in that fish pond, of which would bankrupt him. They're claiming that even milk spilled on the ground at a dairy becomes a biohazardous waste and has to be cleaned up as a biohazardous waste. So there's all kind of insane things in it. And what's ironic is if you could do this, which I don't know how you would do this, if anybody's thought about it, they said that we have to do it at the state lines of our rivers. Well, picture this. I'm a contractor. You build you a big concrete wall. You pull all the water out between that wall. You create a foundation of concrete through the floor of that river. Now you hook a big screen across that river. You're going to have to reinforce it with another kind of screen of some sort, of iron or metal. And now you let the water back in. And so no boats can go across it because you just created a wall. It's not going to work. You're going to have to change the screen. I mean, it's insane stuff that they're coming up with. And if you could accomplish it, you'd kill every fish in the water because the fish need food. And you're going to take all the food out the water with this. So it's just crazy stuff that they do. And the bill was assisted with the direction of ICLEI and the Water Protection and Sustainability Program. So watch ICLEI because that's United Nations local. Okay. This Agenda 21, the one thing I want you to notice about that, it has 40 chapters. I just put some of them on here. But I want you to notice that they entangle one into the other. They do not implement one chapter at a time. They'll do changing consumption patterns. If you live in a sustainable community, sustainable development, which is also under ICLEI Chapter 28, Local Government Authority, it will have, here's Chapter 18 is going to be in there, Management of Water. It's going to have control of consumption patterns. All these things are wrapped one around the other. They don't implement one at a time. They implement all they can at a time. Agenda 21's got chapters to cover everything we do, from breathing to drinking to sleeping to eating. Okay? Okay, the points of sustainable communities. Okay, guys, now we're going to start going into local stuff. Sustainable communities. You have some. They're everywhere. I've got thousands of them that I've found and pulled plans to, and all of them pretty much look the same. And what I want you to notice is there's a few things. Number one, if you live in one, you can't drink coffee outside your house. You can't have a barbecue pit at all under any circumstances. No cooking outside. They've got an urban boundary zone, and everybody needs to notice that urban boundary zone, because these sustainable communities aren't just about controlling the way the people live that are in them. It's about controlling your whole parish or county. Because what they do is when they sign on to smart growth and all these wonderful things, Sustainable America and all, and when they agree with HUD to get some of these wonderful grants they're going to get from DOT to put in these pretty sidewalks in your community because you signed on to a sustainable community, they're going to control your zoning of your whole county. Even farmers way up north of this will be affected. Now they're going to need more acreage in order to let someone build a house on it. Now they're going to have nice little wording into their zoning that says things like they can sell their development rights. If you live outside the urban boundary zone, you can no longer develop a commercial development under any circumstances because you're not in the zone. But you can sell your development rights from your land to someone who lives inside the urban boundary zone. If you live inside the urban boundary zone, you cannot build a house that's even the wrong color as to what they want. Everything you do, the lock you put on your house, the way you live, where you put your car, how many cars can be there, all this becomes law, United Nations law in the sustainable community. These things are written by IUCN. It's insane, and it is a grotesque control of us, and there are thousands of them going in. By the way, your people in your planning and zoning won't tell you this a little bit. These guys are financed through public-private partnerships. That means your tax dollars. So, next. And the best way to get rid of them, we're working on it right now, have your commissioners put them bad boys on a ballot and let the people vote for them and let them know that they're going to be paying for them if they want them. And that gets rid of that. But then you have to push to get rid of the urban boundary zone through your zoning. It's a whole other issue. Okay, Chapter 7. What am I wanting to show you here? All this stuff in Chapter 7 is about the sustainable communities, and it's about control, and it's about promoting land use. You know, they want to control our zoning. They want to control what we can do in our communities, and they do it through zoning. They wrap these things around these zoning people's necks, and one thing you need to know about these is they study your community before they come into it. And they look for people who are leaders that are active in different groups. So like your Chamber of Commerce, your Board of Realtors, just whatever, they're not particular. And then they come into your town and they show them these great little pictures with all these thoughts and ideas. And they have these questions they ask them. But the questions are skewed. So no matter how they answer them, they're going to come up with the answers that they need. And anything that these people don't answer appropriately as to what they want, they'll just dismiss and ignore and keep plowing forward over them. And then when they get done with that, they go to the newspapers, and they get the newspapers to put out articles about how wonderful, beautiful this little community is, and then that puts pressure on the planning and zoning people and your elected officials. Now the elected officials think the people want this, and so now they kowtow into this thing, and then they find out they can get all these grants if they do it, and the planning and zoning person gets this wrapped around their neck, and when they accept it, they have to rezone your whole county. That's part of it, okay? This is the most perfect picture I could find, and I found this on the World Goodwill site. If you look up World Goodwill and Easter Seals, they're all involved in this, and I'll explain to you why in a little bit. But this is perfect because what I wanted to explain to people is when a sustainable community goes into your town, they're not just worried about getting you guys packed and stacked up in that community. They're worried about something much bigger than that. They get up into your economic council, and through them they give out grants, and through those grants they give you cute little buses that everybody rides in for just $1 a piece. But your county's funding it, and it costs a fortune, and it's going broke before you know it. They also get involved with the farmers. They do the food co-op, local food. It sounds great, but what they're doing is they're getting control of those farmers and where those farmers can sell their products at, and what they do is they give the farmers grants, and in those grants are contracts that bind them to doing this and that give them conservation rights of some of their land. So they get to take some of the farmers' land. They love land by water because that controls the farmers and whether or not they can feed cattle and such. They get involved in garbage. They get involved in healthcare. They love councils. They love to get all the councils involved in their stuff. And so what I want you to understand is when you see economy, environment, social responsibility, that's Maurice's strong words. He created them. And when you see sustainable communities, it's not just about that little pod you're looking at that they're trying to put in. It's about your whole county. So be careful. And they're hard to find. They hide them well. Here's There's some wording out. It says, a carrot and stick policy will be used to get your local government to sign on. The carrot is billions of dollars in grants available to your local government agrees to amend zoning laws that restrict housing in outlying areas, forcing people to give up their homes and land and move into the city center. The stick will be denial of the funds and bad publicity generated by green organizations criticizing government officials for turning down free money. The rub is the grants will come with strings attached that force local governments to bend to the will of the feds. It's HUD, it's DEP, EPA, and Department of Public Transportation that's involved in this. Okay? Now let's get into ICLEI a little bit. This is another piece of Agenda 21. This is Local Agenda 21. These guys also function under the name of Local Government Commission. They don't like you to know who they are lately because they've even changed their website. It used to be clearly United Nations website. They're kind of trying to buff it up a little bit. But so ICLEI is over sustainable communities that we was just talking about, and it's over the water campaign, and it's over CNU, which is Congress for New Urbanization. Okay? Congress for New Urbanization is over U.S. Green Building Council. So when you hear Bill Green, that's the United Nations through ICLEI. National Resource Defense Council and LEED. So when you hear LEED certified is a mechanism through which these guys make a lot of money because you go take the course, you pay to take the test, you pay to keep your license up, and it gives them total control of, this is a mechanism by which they can control new building, large buildings, and the revamping of old towns. You see how a lot of towns say they'll become historic districts and stuff like that? That's this stuff, getting into your old towns. And what they'll do is say, well, you know, we'll revamp your old town for you. They give them grants and stuff like that, but they're taking total control. It's how they get control of the old communities too. Okay? Now let's go into the alternate water supply program. This is important. I've got a map off Florida here because I had a gentleman come to me with a set of plans on a 24-inch water main that would wrap around Florida. And he said, I've never seen anything like this. They just came to me and threw it on my desk. And this is a 24-inch water main that they want to put in and hook into our water system. So I started looking into it. And it's done under UNESCO and the Water Foundation. And what this is about is much like the water campaign goes after much like the sustainable community goes after people in the community, water campaign goes after general managers. And what they do is they tell the general managers that they want to design these water lines in order to deal with drought. But a water line doesn't deal with drought. There's a couple reasons. Number one, the water goes in one direction and one direction only, ever. You don't have water go backwards on a water line. Number two, the water cannot be turned off. If you turn it off, you're going to have bacteria growth in it so large that it'll become septic. So you can't turn it off. So once they turn this on, it's on. What it does do, it doesn't help in a drought. Because if I'm having a drought and I'm up here north of where this thing is, you're not going to help me. You're just going to take more of my water away from me. There's no reason. And we're surrounded by water. We don't need this. But what it does do is it does three things. It gives them right to control water pricing. Because now they get to price what they want to the water company. So now when you get your bill, it's going to be more expensive because now you're paying them. It gives them right of consumption pattern. So it gives them right of how much water you can use because then they can penalize you because you use too much water, much like a Verizon phone. The biggest deal it gives them is control of development because they sell you water taps now. Every time you want to build a house, a dollar store, a subdivision, anything, you have to have a water tap. Now they control the water taps. If they don't like where you want to build the building, they're not going to let you build it because you won't be able to get a water tap. Okay? The Dublin Principles. This is all up in that water campaign. It says fresh water is a finite and vulnerable resource essential to sustain life, development, and the environment. Water development and management should be based on a participatory approach involving users, planners, and policymakers at all levels. They always put women in here, and that's because of, I figured out after digging a lot, they're big on Planned Parenthood, control of population, and so they circle around women a lot. So women play a central role in the provision, management, safeguarding of water. Water has an economic value in all its uses and should be recognized as an economic good. In 2012, what you're going to hear from these guys, they're already getting ready to release this, is that they have a right to water pricing. And that's what that statement's saying. They want water pricing, transfer of technology, population control. One of the gentlemen in this, Marty Strong, wants a licensure to be implemented which would be enforced through the medical field, because we'll have web-based reporting everybody's results. And if you have a genetic disposition to have a child that has a problem, they cannot give you your license. You would have to go to a class. If they don't want to give you the license, you cannot give birth. If you give birth or if you get pregnant, it is a state abortion like China. And that's the kind of mindset these guys have behind them. Okay? Global Water Partnership. Let's get back here again. In order to join the Global Water Partnership, the Dublin Principles must be committed to. The principles also form the core of the water policy of the World Bank, Rockefellers, which have been a major actor in developing international consensus and translating the management principles into practice. World Water Council, Global Water Partnership are major actors in international water policy for UN under UNCED, population control. Ironically, the source was, when you look at it, it spells die. Global Water Partnership and ICLEI are involved in this heavily. International Water Resource Management is heavily in it. The IWRM approach requires that many decision-making processes to be taken at the lowest appropriate level, normally local government and communities. So what they're saying here is they want this bottom up. They want the general managers in the water companies to be taking part in this and then instituting this on us. Okay? Okay, now before I get into this on the water thing, I want you guys to realize that they're not going just after water mains. They do go after water mains. They even finance some projects that need to be done when a county doesn't have enough tax dollars, and then very often they end up taking control of it when you can't pay the loan, and they structure the loans where you won't be able to pay the loan very often. But the other thing that they're doing is through the surface water management, they may come to you and say, we want to put a meter on your well, a regular water well that you own. And now you're going to have to make a report to us once a month telling us how much water you used. And you're going to pay us for your water, and we're going to penalize you if you use too much of it. It's illegal. They have no rights. These are not laws. Nothing I'm talking to you about today is a law. It's rules and regulations. They bypass Congress. They have no rights to be on your land. If they come on your land and tell you that they want to do this, you have every right to boot them off your land. Call the sheriff. Tell them, get off my land. Go away. You have that right, and we're going to have to stand up to it. Okay, now, we're going to get into the Gaia a little bit, because you guys need to know that this thing, when they brag, they say it's a one world religion, one world government. And so I started looking a little bit into the religion side of it, and the Gaia, who they had at the 1992 Earth Summit hanging off the front of the boat. She is the Earth Gaia. She's the Earth goddess. And they believe that the Earth is breathing, and that she is the goddess of. And I kept noticing that they had wording that spoke of the light, and I started realizing the light wasn't Jesus or God. And I read in the new age of Aquarius, there will be no room for the force of darkness. They're talking about Judeo-Christians. These people dislike Judeo-Christians. They dislike Jews. They dislike our African Americans. They are evil people. They believe in eugenics. This is Hitler stuff, pretty much. So anyway, and I kept hearing Marty Strong talk about the superior laws of divine nature. And so go ahead. So I called Dr. Michael Kaufman, and I said, what is all this about? And he said, well, go look at the Johannesburg Plan of Implementation event, the conference. Look at the little basket in the front of the stage, and then pull that up and look at what pictures on it, what they're about. So I started looking at all these pictures and seeing what they were about. Go ahead. And this particular one, there's alligators and crocodiles on each side, and those are the wise one guardians. The owl at the top was called the Owl of Wisdom. And this right here, which is a picture from here in the center, this side's Lord Buddha. This side's the Avatar of Synthesis. This side's the Master Dwell called. I started digging into who that is. I dug into all of them, but that one is the supposedly the spirit that Alice Bailey would channel. And Alice Bailey's been dead since I forgot when, but anyway, quite a while. But anyway, she's the lady behind this. She was good friends with the Rockefellers. She was involved with quite a few things, and the United Nations has a meditation room. I don't know how many of you know that. And the meditation room is used by some of the people that were affiliated with her. Okay? And this is the book she wrote, The Externalization of the Hierarchy. And in that book, it calls for a one world order. It calls for a one world religion. But what it calls for, I want you to notice, is a new group of world servers. Look under Gro Brundtland. She has a new group of world servers. That's all. That's playing off of this book, which is written by Alice Bailey, who is best friends with Rockefeller, who's involved in all this stuff. So all the tentacles, all the pieces, all come together. This is what they're doing to us. They're not wanting to take our land and protect it. If someone comes to you and says, I'd like to take some land and put it in a conservation to protect, they are not interested in protecting, they're interested in possessing. This is a horrible thing that's going on throughout the United States and throughout the world. It is about them taking away our American dream, our way of life. They want to do it to everybody. It's nothing personal. They don't care how they do it. And they have one heck of a game plan. And they designed it in a way that they brag that they did it so much so to look like a conspiracy theory that if anyone was willing to speak about it, they could dismiss them. And they did that on purpose, because while our elected officials aren't listening to us, these guys are working wide open, 90-0, accomplishing all they can. And so what we have to do is we have to educate everyone we can. We have to grab back our states' rights. Right now there's a rule trying to come in. It's called the REINS Act, R-E-I-N-S. Look it up. Get hold of your congressman. Tell him you want his name on there. It states that they cannot pass anything, any regulation, any rules, anything into the United States that does not go through Congress and get approved properly. We have to get people knowing what's going on, because they're doing this to us rather well, and they have purposely structured it to be functioning through what we call a shadow government. So whereas we think our government's running something, there's something running our government. And this is what it is, and this is how it's doing it.